So one of the things I'll begin with is the reason, to look at all of these things. Now, this is going to be maybe a little bit different, and I encourage you to, you know, if something resonates with you, then that's good, and if something doesn't, then by all means, just feel free to reject it. But from the very beginning, I think we've gotten used to this symbol, right? It's just a pipe, I guess. So, I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, I guess a pipe is the best. It could be a straw, I suppose, something like that. But the bottom line is that it is a tube of some sort, and this tube represents the human body. Okay. All right. So whenever I'm using this example, 9 times out of 10, I am actually talking about the human body. That's what that rectangle is. And we've talked about this quite a bit, so it'll start to sound pretty darn familiar. Now I'm going to draw a very erroneous line, but it has 2 arrows on the end, and that indicates that it continues forever. All right. So that's what we do in geometry. If it had like a circle at the end, that means that it's a finite point. That's where it ends. So we're going to pretend that somehow this represents infinity. A straight 2-dimensional line. We work with what we got, folks. Now, I am going to go ahead and make an arbitrary distinction between what humans view as finite and more towards infinite. Okay? So we would say that this side is spell physical wrong. I'm going to just type it fast. Sometimes when I try to think about it, physical and infinite or non-physical. So look how I spelled that. I'm going to leave that just for fun. It's physical. So we have these 2 sides of infinity, and I'm using these terms very loosely just so we can talk about them. It's not making absolute sense. That's actually an important point. That's kind of the point I wanted to make, is that in this finite side, and again, this is just a way of talking about it because, there's so many things going on that all we can do is pick out little pieces of it if we want to talk about it. So the closer that we get to finite, that's where we have language, that's where we have words, that's where we view things as solid substances, and this is separate, and Gene is separate from me, right? So that's pretty much how our brain has learned to perceive its environment, to learn to interact with its environment. So the human brain did not come out of the womb perceiving solid matter in the way that we do. I can't prove that because we all have infantile syndrome, memory syndrome. We don't remember a good portion of the beginning of our life. And that's because we have no contextual reference to form memory. Memory can't process the way that we're taking stuff in, but it's the foundation of everything, of the memory, if you will. Does that make sense? Stop me if this doesn't, because then I can pause and we can. So human beings, especially if you're existing in thought, tend to exist in this physical, solid, finite sort of way, right? Of course, we know it doesn't actually exist. Like there's no such thing as finite. We know that the universe is perpetually in motion. Everything is in motion. Light is in motion. The universe itself is in motion. Every electron is in motion around every single nucleus, every atom. Everything is in constant motion around you. The human being just doesn't perceive it all. That's easy, I get it. But what the human being likes to do, because the brain is binary, oh yes, that's perfect. We love to take a snapshot of the present moment. That's what the mind wants to do. And sometimes depending on the mind, it wants to hold on to it. And the more it holds on to it, the more it wants to protect it. And then it's like normal, good old days. Like we don't want to change. I wish things were like they used to be and we had to walk uphill both ways to school. Well, you keep doing that, I'm going to take an online class. You know, if you can't adapt and learn and evolve and you insist on things being the difficult way, because that's obviously worked so well, and I'm not using anybody in this group, but like that's obviously worked so well for you. And that was the thing I did. Like I had a lot of trouble growing up taking advice from people who were visibly not happy. It just didn't make sense to me. It's like, so what are you teaching me? Is you basically teaching me how to run as fast as I can up against a wall? I don't understand. I'm not going to do that because I tried. Like I imitated that, and I don't like hitting that wall. So on one side, we like to take a snapshot. We like to create this binary aspect to experience, and it can be very finite, and thought exists there. Our description of concept, our description of experience exists there. Does that make sense? Now, on the other side, though, the closer that we get to the unseen, the unexperimentable, so far at least, you know, some things are unknowable, some things are still just unknown. And that's the process of discovery. We'll be doing that until foreverness. We're always discovering something. It's an infinite universe, so there'll be a constant, you know, interchange between the unknown becoming known. But I also, at least in the human experience, can admit that there is probably some unknowable. I'm not able to perceive the infinite, you know. So at least in the human form, I can't speak for other forms. I don't know what other, you know, maybe non-carbon based beings are aware of. It would be, I don't know, it's just wild to even think about. And that's the thing. The more that we want to describe the infinite, the further we're getting away from that binary finite, and it gets much more difficult to describe. So it can get very difficult to talk about that infinite aspect of our experience. Does that make sense? And when we do, people start using words interchangeably. We just start talking some stuff, and before you know it, we just made up an entire belief system around the infinite. And 9 times out of 10, those belief systems are trying to take the infinite and make it finite. So basically, they're making God into their own image because it's all that they can relate to. Does that make sense? And then you end up with a God that's a man, a Jesus that is white with blue eyes and blonde hair. And it's like, what are we doing? Does that make sense? So I have a theory that A, it is unnecessary to divide the infinite into all of these different categories. So I just don't do that. I call the energy, you know, ancient cultures and civilizations would take the energy body and they would divide it into a million pieces. The Chinese had different types of qi, for example, and that's fine. I'm not saying that that's not true. I put that easily in the realm of possibility. I don't know. I'm just not interested, really. I just call it the energy body. And the energy body is meant to be felt. And when we try to talk about it, that would look very artistic because it's very difficult to talk about something that we don't really have a language for yet. We don't really have much of a language for it because on average, the human being has been far too focused on words and what they do as physical, our career, the things that we have, what we're passing on or not passing on. And some of that can be important to an extent, but when it's out of balance, you end up working 60 hours a week. You know, you're just working yourself to the bone, and you know, maybe it's for a higher reason in your own mind. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was necessary, but to perpetuate something when it's not is a type of attachment. It's a type of trying to clean and control. So if Gene is in a life situation where he doesn't have to do that, to force himself into that posture because he thinks he should is preventing the evolution of consciousness and adaptability because it's forcing himself back into a particular posture rather than just allowing him to go and move and change. Does that make sense? Okay, so the bottom line is the closer I get to the energy body, I can only point towards it. And that's what I'm going to do with the structure of the body, movement, mindful movement. What we're doing with our T practice, and you're going to read this in The Voice of Power, all of it is pointing towards the energy body. So the energy body must be felt. And we have felt it at times. We feel it sometimes throughout the day and maybe don't even recognize it. It really depends. So I can start to describe how these things feel, but it would start to sound a little bit artsy, esoteric, and isn't hugely beneficial. What is hugely beneficial are the techniques that point towards it, because then a person can do it, practice it, and potentially feel it for themselves if they practice and accumulate the practice without leaking power. That's always the dynamic. And how do we get to the energy body? The third pillar. Just the third pillar, paying attention to the present moment on purpose, because where is the energy body? It exists now. The way that I recommend, eventually activating the energy body, and I say activating, but you're reconnecting with something that you have gone away from. And what I mean by away from, not paying attention. We've already solidified our environment, we've named it, we put it in categories, it's in a very tight-knit box in our mind, and our brain likes that, because it views it as a product of safety or a process of keeping itself safe. I get it. That's my brain's job, is to keep me safe. Fight or flight is a response to keep you safe. I don't recommend trying necessarily to program that out of oneself. Maybe not having those types of responses when they're not necessary. I get it. But so essentially, the closer that I talk to energy things, the less I'm going to have different words, the less I'm going to break it down and tell you about it, because I just think that's wildly erroneous. And when that happens, we start to get into these power dynamics that seem to be prevalent all throughout history. These Gene has a theory, I have a theory. We must compete. My theory is right. And Gene's like, no, mine is right. I can build a better spaceship than you can build a better spaceship. And now we're going to compete, And sometimes, competition with imbalance can lead to new things. It can lead to new creativity. We can have fun with it. But when we cling and attach and focus on it too much, it gets weird. It really does. And then before you know it, this weird competition, specifically in men, it gets probably in every mind to some extent, but men get microaggressive and macroaggressive with this. And to me, it's quite, I don't like it. And rather than thinking judgment thoughts when I see it, I reflect on my own behavior to make sure that it's not present. And if it is present, I redirect. It's a behavior that does not inspire me. So I don't want to do it. I'm aware of my thoughts as they happen. And if I see it going in those aggressive, I want to control and manipulate, and I got to get me, I redirect that instantly. That's not the direction I want to go with the ripples of my life experience. So the tools and techniques, however, can point towards paying attention to the energy body without trying to change it, without trying to control it, without trying to manipulate it, without trying to name it, without trying to put it in a box, because we can start to feel it and experience it. From peace, this energy will flow. And that's what this represents. And this is the way that I look at chi. And I don't use that word. There's a reason I don't use that word. I just use the word energy body. It's just easier for me to work with, because I don't want to break it down to the nth degree. If it's over here, I'm gonna leave it over here. But if it's, something else in my experience on this end, then I can talk about it. Gene has a bluish colored shirt. We can talk about that, right? I'm okay with that. I don't want to go off into the woods and not talk to anyone. So the energy that flows through the body, this is it. This is what I'm representing. So in this picture, these little drawings here, this is the energy body, the energy that flows through the body. Energy. You could call it chi, you could call it prana, you could call it juju, I don't care. I'll accept it all, and I won't necessarily cling and attach to any of it. But I know it's there because I feel it flowing through me. You know, at all times, if I pay attention to it, the more I pay attention to it, the thicker it gets, in a manner of speaking. It feels denser. That's not a bad thing. Usually, I guess dense is sometimes like, oh, I can't move, I'm stuck. No, I don't mean that. I mean, it feels more visceral. It feels more tangible. It feels more real. Okay. So according to a lot of theory out there, actually I can just talk about this and then I can show you in the graphic in a second. There are a lot of theories out there, and I put them in the realm of possible. I don't want to judge it. It doesn't benefit me to judge another person's perspective. So if Gene gives me a perspective that is totally different than mine, if he's not asking for a debate, I'm not going to debate him. And if I start to, hopefully I'll redirect that rule of three, because that's not a behavior that I want to engage in. Sometimes on Facebook, I feel myself getting pulled into it. Sometimes I had already hit send by the time I realized I don't want to do that. You know, it is what it is. It's a learning process. Does all this make sense so far? Okay, so we're getting into the foundation of the human body and how energy can more naturally flow through it. I will be very general. You know, I don't want to get, I feel like if it's more general, we can work with it better. It's easier to remember. There are other people who will get more detailed, and I think that's great. That's something that they can do. They maybe really enjoy getting into the different meridians and mapping it out. That's an exploration that I can actually really respect, and I'm okay with it. That's not really what this is. I want it to be as general and as related to just mindfulness as possible. That way we're not overthinking it, and we're not trying to, you know, get too far into dividing the infinite, because it just, you can, but I promise there's going to be 1,000 competing theories. The more you do that, the more you get into, everybody really has their own view of that infinite. Go into a room of 10 people and they really start to talk about that infinite aspect, all 10 are going to say something somewhat different, especially the longer you talk to them. It's going to get more and more and more different. And then especially if it gets into their experience of it, because experience is so unique. The conversation with those 10 people, it's going to get very different because it's a unique thing. Does that make sense so far? Are we good? Okay, so I don't look at things as, you know, too much chi or not enough chi. This is important for the way that I talk. It's not, I'm not telling you what to think. I do not talk about transferring energy from one person to another, because I have other things that I, you know, view in principles such as thermodynamics, transference of energy. I think that this type of energy still follows certain geometrical patterns. And we would look at those patterns and we would maybe call them laws or rules or the way that something is moving. Does that make sense? Open to questions, yes.
So the energy body then is personal. It's not shareable. It's personal. It's your own.
No, everybody has it, just like attention is shared. So it's not necessarily personal, but it can't be made. It's actually the opposite, because if we make it personal, now you think you can have more and I can have less. And I have viewed that as that underlining male aggression of competition again. And it leads to, I am Master Ernest and I can set things on fire with my chi. You must come and worship my ways. And then before you know it, we're in a cult, we're in a religion, and we're doing very weird things. Maybe. Do you see what I mean, though, Gene? So what I'm looking to not interact with is the idea that you can have more, I can have less, you don't have enough, or that I can give it to you. Do you see what I mean? I do observe vibration. So when you walk into a room and everybody is already in flow, your energy more easily can find flow because it's drumming. It's like vibrating like a ripple. But don't imagine the ripple on the surface. Imagine the ripple down below. And it sends that 360-degree spherical ripple. So when you walk into the room, you're already rippling, but they're rippling, and there's more of them, and they've been in that space, and you more easily find that flow with them. That's why I use the term modulation. So if first of all, I don't want you to feel, I won't want you to feel better. That's a form of interference. I don't want to interfere with you, Gene. So if you say, man, I'm feeling terrible, I might say I'm sorry. That's just the way people talk to each other. But typically, I don't say I'm sorry. You know, somebody tells me that they're going through a divorce or they're unhappy. I don't tell them I'm sorry. I don't want to. I will offer advice if they ask, but otherwise, it's not my place to feel sorry for you. Do you see what I mean? That's a form of interference. Now, sometimes when we are attached to things, that is wildly difficult. You know, and I get it. So I'm not perfect, and I'm not pretending I don't have those attachments, and that's always easy for me. So make that clear. So I don't look at energy as I can send it to you. However, and I think this may make Donna happy, is we can take a principle of connection and we call it quantum entanglement. We can take that principle loosely. I'm not a huge fan when someone takes a principle and they take that one thing and just make it for everything. You know, so it's that thing that we learn in statistics that, what is it, causation, or which one is it doesn't imply causation? Correlation doesn't imply causation.
Correlation.
Yeah. But we can make a correlation here that we are all connected. We've seen that. We've experimented with that. So I do think that there's a way for me to focus on my energy and my vibration and my ripple. And I believe that ripple can have an influence on other people, especially if they want it to. Does that make sense? And I believe that's how a lot of the manipulation in the world is happening right now, because some people know this and they're manipulating people on an energy level. Because if you are an unconscious person, meaning that you're not deliberately intending the points of your intention, you're a leaf at the mercy of the wind. They are grabbing your attention, both using your unconscious mind and your conscious mind, both together. Does that make sense? I don't want that to paint a grim picture. Yes, Donna, please go ahead.
Are you creating energy, or are you opening to the flow of energy that already exists?
Absolutely not creating anything. The universe, if you use the word infinite, it means what exists already exists, has to have always existed. Now that's going to be super duper hard for a binary brain because we're getting towards the infinite side. I don't recommend it. You can feel it. It's called hydrostasy. I call it hydrostasy. When you put those two things together, it creates that synergy that can be felt. When you're on the surfboard and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna wait. I'm riding this wave, and now you're in flow. That has a feeling. You can feel the flow. We've all felt it. When Gene is on the tennis court, if you really paid attention to how you felt when you were in that, and you were able to do that without taking yourself out of flow, because sometimes that, you would see, you would feel that energy just moving through you and flowing through you, and it's there. You're feeling it, you're interacting with it. And that's why when someone says, well, how did you do that? What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. I felt it. I felt the ball going this direction. I perceived him without even seeing my opponent was over there. I just knew it. You see what I mean? We really start to access the infinite when we're in flow. Donna lifts up an entire car and just tosses it because one of her, loved ones is underneath, that type of thing. It's like that superhuman strength is we're breaking rules. because we're getting closer to the infinite. The rules are over here on the finite side. But no, in no way, shape, or form am I creating anything. Absolutely not. So the theory here is, when I come into this world, I see. I see a lot more than I do right now, because I'm more connected to the energy body when we're born. We haven't created any type of plug, congestion in the flow of energy. I wouldn't say any, because again, when we develop in the womb, we've already started to carve the block. We know that, we know that the things that a person is doing does affect a baby. So in that regard, we are starting to chip away. So, there are circumstances where maybe the energy isn't flowing, smoothly for every single child that's born. Okay. I don't have evidence for all of those things. So it's not a subject I talk too much about. But ultimately, under normal conditions, average conditions, standard conditions, whatever word we want to use, the energy we come into this world, it is flowing. We are vibrant. We are alive. We are connected. Have you ever seen a baby or a small child seem to connect to the energy first? Why is that baby smiling? What are they feeling? How are they able to connect to me so well? How do they soothe me so much? That baby's across the room and I just hear, how does a cat and its vibration, and how are we so easily modulation? Energy is simply being modulated. We're influencing one another, right? But all the energy that exists, has existed, will always exist, and it's flowing through the human being almost like a battery or like a magnifying lens, if that makes sense. So I use this as a representation, and it's a tube. So there's never more flowing through this tube. There's never less flowing through this tube. It's not created. It's not destroyed. So I can't give it to you. I can't charge you for it. Ultimately, this is the one thing that capitalism should never be able to touch, and that's the energy body. But it does. It tries. Now, here's what happens in the human body, in the human experience, and it really would probably look like a mandala, but it wouldn't look like a geometrical mandala. Most energy, the human body, because of the way that we think, the way that we behave, it looks like a spider web that had been, created by a spider on some sort of substance. So I don't think I can do this with my just my box. So this is what I mean. And I'm being very general, but let's say now this is the energy body of the person, maybe because the way they're standing all the time, or the way they're punching over in their seat, or the most likely, though, the way that they're thinking is what's leading to all of that in the first place. So there's a lot of thought. And we could say that this is just one of the infinite energy channels in the body now. So this could be a channel in the body, it could be the whole body itself, energy flowing through it, however we want to use it. But in this example, it's the same amount of liquid or energy flowing through. It's a constant. It's infinite. Infinity is the constant, in a manner of speaking. So if it's the same amount and the aperture at the top is too wide, it will just kind of trickle down the side. It won't flow. You know how water, when it flows perfectly and it's rotating, it starts to look like ice. What's that word, Donna? Isn't there a term for that? Can't remember. There is. There's a term for when the viscosity of water makes it look like an icicle and it looks like it's not moving. That's flow. That's what we're looking for. We want our chi and our energy to flow through the body and get to the point where it's moving, but it looks still. It's still, but it looks like it's moving. That was talking in circles, but so it trickles at the top, which is not flow. That's not flowing. It's not creating that effect that I just mentioned. And unfortunately, because the aperture, if there's an aperture too open, there's definitely an aperture too closed. That's the way the aperture, that's the way this two-dimensional figure works. So it's all gonna eventually start to pool. And it won't come through the bottom very well at all. Do you see what I mean? Now, and I'm using two-dimensional figures to talk about things, and it can be tricky, but I'm hoping you get the gist. This is just get the gist type stuff. It's not super literal. What we really want is we want that flow of water to come on through and just smoothly flow through the body like a conduit. And that's what gives us our animated life force. That's what really charges things. Does this make sense? Ah, that's it. Laminar
Laminar flow when it moves.
flow.
Yeah.
That's what.
So then back to Jean's original question about is it personal? So if it's not created, if it's something that we are aware of, allowing without resistance, and you gave the baby example. So we exist in this moment in time with the totality of our experience and understanding, and how much flow and resistance we have in this moment is personal. So therefore, how we experience the energy body to any degree is based on that.
Yes. So imagine if you were in like a bowl of soup. We're all in that soup. And there's only so much soup, and let's just say the soup is infinite. So now we have an infinite amount of soup. Again, don't try to think too much about that. You're gonna just think in circles the whole time. We cannot wrap our mind around infinity. We have to feel it. We have to immerse ourselves in it, dive in it, look into a child's eyes for a moment, and you're in it. You're in infinity. So, and I keep using the child because, of course, they haven't started to create the personal obstructions, the personal points of tension, the personal habits that create even more points of tension, to where now the energy body is not vibrating in this pattern that creates a beautiful mandala. We're creating a spider's web that looks like it's all jumbled up. And the energy is just really having a hard time flowing through the body of many people. I don't want to say most, I don't like getting into quantifying that number. There's 7 billion people on Earth. I will say that many people, at least, are having a lot of difficulty with the energy body because A, they're completely unconscious of it. They're not energizing it with the light of their attention like we come into the world doing. How does a baby learn to pick up their body and sit up and stand and walk and run so quickly? Like, it takes me so long to learn a new skill, a physical skill. Like, I got to do it again and again and again before I can even look like I know what I'm doing. But a baby's just like, whoop, got it. What's next? And then they're already manipulating you, like 3-4 months in, and they're already throwing that thing on the ground because they know you're going to pick it up. They're learning cause and effect conceptually. How? Like, they're 2, 3, 4 months old, and they've already.
Oh, they do it. They do it over and over and over and over and over again. They just don't struggle with it. They just do it.
And then they do it to manipulate you because they know the cause and effect. They're like, Mom's going to pick this up. Boop. Yeah, so, okay, now the reason that I mention all of this is because, first of all, we have a mindfulness practice. That is getting out of your own way. The more that you engage the present moment, the more the mind learns to relax, the more space we create in our thought, the more we do this practice and our behavior. And I'm slingshotting 10, 15 years, maybe for some, 5 years for others. I don't know. I hate quantifying that also. It's going to be different for everybody, and let's avoid any type of competition. So on average, I would say that many people, the way that they're thinking, the way that they're behaving, the way that they're interacting with their life experience is causing their energy body to distort, and it doesn't flow. and it is the cause of almost all sickness in the body. So if a virus comes into your body, the virus didn't make you sick. Just like when a medicine goes into your body, the medicine didn't make you better. It breaks the balance. Now the body isn't in balance anymore. It doesn't produce something that it should be producing. It overproduces something that it shouldn't be overproducing. And now we're sick. Inflammation is an overproduction type of thing. Do you see what I mean? And when we put a medicine in our body, it's not like the medicine just magically heals. No, the medicine instigates something in a deficiency, or it helps to restrict something when there's an excess. That is also conducive with traditional Chinese medicine and most forms of ancient and current medicine. It's still the way it is today with Western medicine. Most doctors know that the drug that they're prescribing isn't doing the curing or the healing. It's inspiring the body to do that. Even if they don't describe it the way that I just did, they know that. They know on a cellular level, they're inspiring the body to heal itself. Does that make sense? What a lot of other traditions do is, maybe because they're older, they also acknowledge the energy body's role in our health. And if the energy body is flowing well, we're very likely going to be much more healthy. We're going to heal much quicker, and our physical body has the opportunity to evolve. Does that make sense? And I don't mean just evolving to defend ourselves against predators. We've already done that. Our body has already evolved out of necessity. Our body and our mind can now start to evolve because we are conscious, aware beings. And that's how we survived the supernova. I know I just jumped ahead 50 million years, but is it million or billion? 5 billion. I just jumped 5 billion years. Yeah, if it's 10 billion year life cycle, we're halfway through. We have a 5 billion. We got 5 billion years to level up, folks. Like, let's get to work. Okay, so I do agree that with a balanced structure, and this isn't martial, it's not designed for, self-defense, none of that. It's just designed because I look at a baby and I'm like, okay, feet are parallel, knees are not past the toes unless they go and reach for something, but then they go right back. So the baby goes into an extreme, back to balance, into an extreme, back to balance. My dog goes into an extreme, back to balance. The cheetah goes into an extreme and then back to balance. Well, I see a consistency here. And we can do that too. If Donna sees somebody who is in a fire and she thinks, well, no, she doesn't think, she just instantly goes into flow, or she thinks and she believes she can save them, and then that inspires the flow, she's going to access that energy body. And that energy body is going to flow through her to the nth degree, and she'll do things, and maybe if we record her, she'll do it with terrible posture, maybe, who knows? She could go into an extreme and then come back to balance. Humans don't do that very well because we have the tendency of overthinking. But so we go into an extreme and we're like, oh my God, I love this. I want to be here all the time. I love the extreme. And then we cling to it, we attach to it, we place emphasis on it. And before you know it, we have the 99% seeking a 1% lifestyle. I have a strong opinion about that, but I'll keep it to myself. It is erroneous. Who used that word? So the first part of structure that I want to talk about is also the shortest, because I knew I would have this introduction. I think that we can start with the feet and then just work our way up. So really what you want to do, if you want to do it, is go ahead and look at a child, look at a young enough person before they're, and this is different for everyone, because for young people, trauma is happening earlier and earlier. And that is already shaping their carte blanche, unfortunately. I don't like that. Who would like that? That's not something to look at and say, that's I'm happy with that. It's imbalanced. It's not in harmony with everything around it. So the human body, if it takes a certain type of structure and we have our mindfulness, the energy will flow. We're getting out of the way psychologically. We can loosen up a little bit physically. We're not going to try to get into any stiff shape. It doesn't have to look like earnest. So when I do a standing meditation, I will give you 5 different ways to do it. You choose. How does your body feel today? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? It's okay. You go ahead and do your thing. So let's say Gene, because he has his camera on, has had a little bit of a hunch for 35 years. That may be there for a very long time. It doesn't have to go away instantly. In fact, I would say trying to force it out instantly is going to cause a contraindication somewhere else. But if we can just naturally over time loosen up, he may still have a little bit of a hunch, but because of the loosening up and the relaxation and the mindfulness, the energy will flow better. And when the energy flows better, the body's intelligence is really accessed. And then before you know it, his posture is drastically improving and he has no idea why. He's like, what the heck is going on? I just feel better like this. It just feels more natural now. You see what I mean? Does that make sense? Okay, so when we talk about posture, when we talk about the structure, not posture, structure of the bones relative to the rest of the body, we want balance. We don't want stiffness. It doesn't have to be fully relaxed. I found that to be another type of attachment in Tai Chi. People are saying, I want to be fully relaxed, completely relaxed, absolute relax. And I'm like, wait a second, folks. Absolute relaxation means that you're a puddle on the floor. You can't stand up. We need a balance between tension and relaxation. But what we don't want is unnecessary tension. I want breath with the least amount of muscular tension. I cannot breathe without muscles. My heart is a muscle. I mean, it is constantly tensing and relaxing. I mean, I can work with that dynamic. I don't have to exist in one extreme. Does that make sense? So we're not going for any weird extreme here. We're going to do our mindfulness, and then every now and then we can check into where our body is and then go back to our mindfulness. So if I have sore elbows, I'll check into, or sore shoulders, I'll check into my elbows every now and then go back to my practice. Not going to focus on that to the nth degree because that is a violation of principle. You see what I mean? If I go around thinking about my shoulders all the time, that is a violation of principle. If I'm trying to force them into a different posture, again, it's going to cause very likely a contraindication in the body because we're using an active force. That's not flow. So we'll just start with the feet. In an average, commonly, people lose the roundedness of the groin. Watch that child stand for the first time and you will see, not because they have a diaper on, but they will have a rounded groin. The qua, as the Chinese call it, that little area in the groin going down from the leg. That area typically, because of our lifestyle, and then also our thinking is what drives the lifestyle, so it still goes back to the thinking, the qua closes, where it becomes turned in sometimes almost, and then the feet waddle out. And now our knees are following our feet, and they're not supposed to move that way. That's the thing. We have a hinge joint on the knee, and it's supposed to rock like that. The knee is not supposed to go back and forth that direction. Yet, I don't know. Maybe we'll evolve that way. We'll have more and more people born triple, double, quadruple jointed, and then who knows? That could become the new average. And then they'll look back at us and be like, oh, you poor single jointed folks. Can't move your leg in a 360-degree way. I feel sorry for you. Does that make sense? So what I do and what I've done for a very long time, once I started to eliminate all of the comparing and contrasting, trying to control, figure it out, manipulate, once I started to just, practice that out of my present moment, my practice began to be just set and go, set and go. Does that make sense? This is a set and go principle, if you will. That way, I'm not existing in an extreme of over focusing on the body's posture. Okay, so I'll start with the feet and then we'll move our way up over the next 4 days if you find this information valuable. One thing that we do, because we've lost the quad, the knees are going in, the feet are waddling out, our whole lower base is no longer supporting the upper structure. And because of the thinking and the energy is going in all different directions, it's all over the place because of tension and things like that, the way that we're thinking, the way that we're behaving. The upper portion starts to take in the support. The upper body is trying to support. Does that make sense? Because the base isn't established, the upper body is trying to do everything. And that's weird because our feet are the ones touching the ground and gravity is going down. So when our body is trying to resist gravity constantly because our lower structure is just willy-nilly, we end up with funky posture, a body that's constantly hurting. I used to get weird pains in my body, and people would just say, Ernest, that's natural. Everybody does. I'm over here like, oh, it went away. Oh, good. So it must be nothing. No, that's not normal. Our body should not be doing that. I don't see a young person just all of a sudden, oh, that went away. I'm okay now. No. So I don't want to put myself on a pedestal. That's a silly thing to do. But I don't really feel that presently. I don't really get those weird pains anymore. If I sit in a weird way for too long, I will start to hurt. That's the bottom line. The energy isn't flowing as well. I'm getting little areas of plugged upness. It's getting inflamed, tense, and it hurts. If that is perpetuated and sustained over a period of time, I will get sick in weird ways in other places. So the foot should have an even amount of distributional weight. And when that happens, the knees tend to follow suit, and then the groin starts to kind of loosen up. So what we're used to doing is the weight typically starts to go in, and then the feet waddle out. And now we have this weird inner pressure that looks like a pipe that's like this. That's a familiar little drawing. And then the energy just isn't flowing smoothly through that. It can't. If we see this with all other types of energy and electricity. You know, if you had a conductor and it just had a bunch of useless directions, it wouldn't function properly. Like it wouldn't be as efficient or as fast or be able to function as well as it could if we gave it a bunch of unnecessary directional routes for it to follow. Does that make sense? I just made that up right now, but I feel like that analogy works. So the foot, because we've been putting so much weight, I recommend paying attention to the outside of your foot. Is it touching the ground? Where is the weight on my foot? Can I make a small correction and then just go back to my present moment? So a fun thing to do whenever you're in a standing meditation, and if we're doing 4 modes, we're doing that informally and formally. So Jean, if you're doing a 4 modes practice all throughout the day, informally, there's going to be times where you recognize that you're standing, you recognize that you're sitting, laying down, and moving. Well, when you're standing, that is the perfect opportunity to where are my feet now? Are they parallel? Where is the weight? And then go back to the rest of the practice. And that's what I recommend doing. We can wiggle our toes a little bit. Let's check into our feet. Let's give them some awareness. If your feet hurt, there are ways to interact with it to not really emphasize the pain, because we make a correction and go back to the practice, P1, P2, whatever we're doing, instead of just over focusing on that one area with bomb-like focus that will exacerbate the feeling and could potentially lead to a different contraindication because the mind isn't balanced now. The mind's imbalance and over focus on the area causes the physical and energetic imbalance. So now you have a closed feedback loop of imbalance feeding, imbalance feeding, imbalance. And then before you know it, we're sick and then we die. Yes, Donna.
I have a photo of it if you want.
Ooh, do that. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So the pronation, they have overcompensated. Do you see how the inside of the foot is starting to come up off the ground? For the very well fit one on the right hand side. We are looking for neutral. However, we've spent so much time at the supination that we need to do a little bit of the pronation. And then that can help achieve a type of balance. Does that make sense? So again, we're not looking to overemphasize either side, but we have to pay attention to the side that is not getting any attention. You know, it's the one that is in or out. Does that make sense? So, okay, we can go back. That does make sense. That's a perfect graphic. Thank you, Don.
I don't know how to get it off now.
Oh, I think I can end it. So the way that we can work with this is, and this is how I recommend it, because it's worked for me and it is working for others, to check in, make a tiny correction, and then check into something else. Not check out. We're never trying to check out. And then check into something else. Go back to what you were doing. And then we do that more and more and more and more. It gets easier. We accumulate skill. It's not as difficult. And then the body starts to take on that posture. It remembers. The muscles learn. The joints learn. And then so we're going to start with the feet and we'll work our way up. And then we should be able to see kind of how the energy flows through the body in a more natural posture. So we're not going to try to, Lisa, we wouldn't try to train the S curve out. You might want to do that if you're a wrestler, because you want to be able to absorb force. We're not trying to absorb force, we're trying to walk upright. That's okay. Small changes will accumulate, and I don't recommend leaking power. The leaking power process in thought is what will unwind any progress that you've made so far. Because the leaking power causes more plugs, and then the energy is no longer flowing smoothly again. And then we're very likely going to go back to the thinking that messed it all up in the first place, and now we've taken several steps back in our practice, if we're looking at it that way, back and forth, up and down. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns? So the recommendation here, and then we'll move our way up the body pretty quickly because there's not that many points that I want to emphasize. I want to keep it as simple as possible, but we use our practice. Let's pay attention to our feet. Let's wiggle our toes. Let's feel the foot on the ground. When we're fox walking or mindfulness walking, heel to toe, without trying to control, without trying to manipulate, without overly focusing, because we don't need to do that. The small changes will add up. We just have to let that happen. The mind gets on this erroneous time scale and it wants to force itself into a certain posture. That will cause a contraindication. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is, in your example of the baby trying over and over again until they figure it out, they're going for the block. They're looking at that block and they are attracted to that color red of the block, but propelling themselves to the block is a learned process of trial and error over and over again. So they start by reaching for it, then they crawl for it, then they learn to get up and walk to it. And they are not overly emphasized on walking, crawling, or they're just trial and erroring, becoming aware of their body propelling itself and noticing how the adults in the room propel or other children propel themselves. So it's just like any other point of attention. You don't lose your plan in the night before or the morning, how you're going to approach your battlegrounds, or how you're not going to forget about the color yellow. You're not going to forget about is just going to use the position of your feet as you walk as a point of attention, and then back to as something to notice as part of your practice, not exclusively over-focused and out of balance of the practice.
Right. Yeah, and we just keep moving. Yeah, that's right, Donna. And then we could call it a principle of checking in and then checking into something else. So you make a small adjustment. Maybe I recommend in standing only. That's one of the best times to make your adjustment, because you can just make your quick adjustment and go back to what you're doing. But when we're walking, we can get a little bit more sensual. I feel my feet on the ground. I like grass. Oh, I like the shoe. It feels, comfortable. I feel the softness, that type of thing. When we get home, these are things I've started to do. I take off my socks. I want a nice soft sock. Or I'll rub my feet gently, to get the energy moving a little bit because I've been on them all day. That type of thing, you see? And the principle is, and I think you touched on this, you got this. Check in, make a small adjustment, and then go back to what you're doing. That's a lot like the rule of three, in a manner of speaking. You rule of three, and then you go back to your practice and what you're doing. You don't stay focusing on that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like when you observe the baby, when you observe your dog. They do downward dog and then they do the opposite stretch and then they go back to what they're doing. But they're still sniffing and they're still smelling and they're thinking about that it's getting close to time to eat because they feel that feeling in their belly or whatever. As you were talking, whenever I feel like I learned something new, I always remember something from childhood at the same time. So it also feels like I'm remembering. As I was growing, there was more and more social construct to sit in a chair and sit at the table, sit until you're served, sit until everybody's done with dinner, sit in the classroom. Not so much in kindergarten, but then more and more, a lot of sitting. And I think there's a huge imbalance in society in sitting. I think it's so destructive. I noticed the minute I retired or the minute summer vacation came, my body felt so much better because I just was not forced to sit for so long or required to sit for so long, but it does feel like force. I remember, spinning for children is a neurological balancing thing. They learn their body and space by spinning. Kids like to spin. And it's something that neurologists note. And I remember being in the grass with my neighbors playing. And we would say, let's make the grass carpet. And if you spin and you look down at the grass, it looks like a carpet because you're spinning and you can't notice the different blades of grass. It just becomes a green carpet underneath your feet. And I remember if you look down too far with your head, the momentum of your big fat head would propel you forward. So you couldn't stand in one space and spin anymore. So you'd had to keep your posture erect, pull your shoulders over your hips, your chin tucked in, and you can only look down with your eyes in order to spin effectively without falling forward. So that was all trial and error, balance, noticing where your body is in space, all of that. And then back to the carpet, and then the feeling of when you stopped, the dizziness, and that was a fun thing to do. Spinning on a playground, there were all spinny type of things where somebody would turn you really fast so that you would spin teacups in the amusement park. It was part of being aware of your body and space.
Well, maybe that's why it took me so long to get this awareness of my body in space and time, because I did not like spinning. I didn't like spinning rides. I didn't like the merry-go-round. I didn't like people spinning me. I'm like, it makes me dizzy.
I used to get sick on a swing.
Wow. No, I did have fun on swings, I'll say that. Now, if I get on a swing now, I'll get dizzy. I did that I got on a swing as an adult and was just playing on it, and I got off of it, and I'm like, oh, I don't feel so good. But Vicky says that I'm about to turn 30, and I hear people say all the time that's when your warranty runs out. I refuse to accept that my body feeling shitty is natural. So, the tools of attention from Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda are the most important things for me from those books. That's it. I don't know if I ever would have thought of looking at shadows and leaves and the things the way that I do, defocused vision. I don't know if I would have thought of those things on my own. And I don't know how long it would have taken for me to arrive there. I don't know. I learned it from a book. And I'm like, let me do this and see if it does anything, like what is going on. So I love those techniques. However, there was another thing I got a few other things from those books. When Don Juan and Carlos were walking through the mountains, and of course this could be fiction, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Carlos or Don Juan can run up the mountains and he can do things physically that it doesn't make sense because he should be older than Gene. You know, he should be like near his like 85, close to 90 range, according to Carlos's calculations. He should be old as shit. But yet he's doing things physically that are just unheard of. Now, that could be a little bit of fictional flair. Fine. However, we have seen examples to some extent where this can occur. And usually when asked, what are you doing? You know, what is your trick? And most people say the trick isn't what I do, it's what I don't do. It's not that I do all of these miraculous things every day, it's that I don't sit as long as everybody does, right, Donna? I don't eat the foods that other people are eating. I don't behave and think the way that other people are behaving and thinking. So my result is much different. It's a different product coming from this experience than another's. So with that said, I think we can upset that setup. So if from the time that we're born, from the time that we transition to something new, our parents and our community are all supporting wellness, balance, flow, imagine how healthy we could potentially be late. And then eventually, hey, I've seen this in visions and you can read about it. But in that enlightened society, and I say enlightened very loosely, in the society that doesn't create the shit that we're creating, 9 times out of 10, they transition peacefully in their sleep. A lot less accidents because they're aware. It could still occur. Space junk could still fall from this. Anything, we're still in random probability, and it will always be unfortunate when those things happen. But in this vision that I see, they're not starting the process of dysfunction so early, or sometimes maybe even not at all. And so the children and everybody, they're constantly learning how to self-improve and grow and learn and create. That's what we're doing, you know. And so when I envision this society, this group of people that I don't see anywhere, maybe there's some small examples of this in pockets of the world, but in the vision, it's kind of like a fuller scope of humanity type of thing. But we're not creating those issues. You know, we're not plugging up as much. The energy body is flowing much better. So the mind evolves, the body evolves, the energy body finds new ways to move, and that geometrical pattern, that mandala of energy that the human being is creating becomes more, it could look complicated or more, it has more detail and depth and more dimension. Does that make sense? I'm kind of describing how it feels and how it looks to me, but yeah, so I think that
yes,
go ahead,
Ernest,
Donna.
I understand what you're saying, and it also accounts for the personal versus the shared experience, because you are choosing to be aware of your body and space and how it is affected by what you have done or not done during the last 2 minutes or 5 years or whatever. You're focusing on points of attention, and you're compensating, counterbalancing, adapting, adjusting accordingly, and that's very personal. But it's shared because of the things that we have to do culturally, like sit in chairs, and so many of the physical ailments may be similar because of what we've forced the human body to do, or also because of how we've become programmed to think and solve problems and things like that. So those have become shared experiences because so many of us are doing the same thing. But it's personal because we have accumulated our own experience to this point in time, and how we navigate loosening that and adjusting to that is personal.
Yes. And then we have the secret fifth destroyer. So the secret fifth destroyer is the accumulated habit of humanity so far. There's this shared collective type of consciousness that continues. It's like the mood of humanity. You know, and the other four destroyers are more like that blunt emotion of humanity. The mood is underlining emotion. And so the mood of the human species will change the more that we individually change. We contribute to that overall. And then before you know it, Gene, imagine a society that is very technologically advanced, but we're not using it just for entertainment. We're not using it just to cure the problems that we've created. You know, I love our medical advancements, but we've created those medical advancements because of the fundamental dysfunction of the human condition. But if that didn't exist, what would we create? Like, what would we do? What would we expand into if we weren't just constantly compensating for the insanity aspect of the human being? We would live much longer, we would live much healthier, and I think on average, I've seen it in vision, that's not true necessarily, it's just my vision, that human beings would, on average, they would pass away very peacefully, transition to, pass away, I don't like how that sounds. They would ripple into the fabric of the cosmos very smoothly, transition very smoothly, you know, because they didn't create all of the attachment and the clinging and the trying to control in the first place. You see what I mean? I think that's possible. But sometimes I look at the world and I'm not sure it's probable. We'll see. But that's why I don't talk about the fifth destroyer, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. I've been with people as they transition, and,
No,
it does happen. Sometimes people get it all very close to the end, very close to the transition. They get it, and they're like, it's like, I don't know, I'm showing my age, but when I was a kid, there was a TV show called The Flying Nun, and she had this big giant habit on her head, and she figured out that if she tilted her head into the wind with this habit, she could literally fly because of the apparatus on her head. And it just reminded me of when a bird takes flight or an airplane finally lifts off the ground. It was this nun with the habit on her head. It was Sally Field, by the way. And that moment of catching the wind and finally lifting off the ground, you know, you everything aligns, and transition happens like that, believe it or not. You can see it happen in a human when they figure out, I just need to let go of this human experience and take flight into this next transition. Some people get it way sooner than others, but you know, and some fight it to the end, and you know, they probably get it once they transition. They realize, oh, I was fighting something for nothing. But yeah, I would like to slide in, you know, nice and smoothly as well.
Yeah, I guess I get that, and I can appreciate that. I think I was also speaking on the accumulation throughout our entire life experience. You know, we're adding that to the collective. So every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every behavior that we perform and act out is a contribution to the collective momentum of the human species, right? Yeah.
So then our energy, going back to an earlier question, our energy can influence others.
Absolutely, modulation-wise, though, yeah.
Right, because we're not adding resistance to the flow. We're adding flow. We're aligning with the flow of the flow, and the more of us that do that, the stronger the current becomes.
Yes, going with the Tao is going with the moment, the way the universe moves, and the universe is evolving. So if we go with the way the universe moves, we will evolve, we will change, we will hopefully progress. And by progress, I mean we exist as humans, hopefully for a very long time. Some people say that evolution isn't good or bad. I would say to the species that's being allowed to change over time, they view it as good. The species that is now going extinct because they can't change over time, I would think they would qualify that as bad. I mean, if we're looking at it in these binary terms, to continue to exist, good. To no longer exist as a species, not good, in a very binary way of looking at it, at least to the species. Okay, so here are two principles that we talked about today, and then I have to head out because I have to take Neo to the vet. But what we're looking to do is to balance the flow of the energy body. Not more, not less, not better, not worse, not comparing, not contrasting. We're just hoping that the energy that is already there, that's always existed, that will always exist, is just allowed to flow more smoothly through you. You have channels in your body, and we want that energy to flow smoothly. The outside of the energy body, or the energy body that's slightly outside of us, we just want it to flow smoothly. Does that first principle make sense? This will be the principle behind all of the movement that I potentially offer. I don't even know if I ever will. I'll put it into a format though. It is a principle of balance, yeah, but specifically like with the body and the energy body, I want to make that principle clear because of what is represented in the world. I have more, you have less, you have to get it from me, I'm sending it to you, I'm taking it on from other people. I think you could be influenced and modulated for sure. The vibrational ripple can be affected by the vibrational ripple of others, especially if you're unconscious. That's called the nemesis. The nemesis has you. Okay, and so the second, does the first principle make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The second principle is that we check in and then go back to sensory attention training. That's a principle of this particular practice, the way that we're going to do it. And it's going to go from standing to moving, and it's going to be all four modes: formal, informal, guided, and assisted.
What's it called?
I don't have a name for it, but you check in. I should think of a name for it. But essentially, the principle is to check in to the structure of the body and then go back to sensory attention training. The other aspects of your day. What else is in your toolbox? The colors, the shapes, the sounds, the feels, right? I don't want to focus on my structure to the nth degree. But when I sit, I check in. I'm like, here I am. I am now sitting. I don't want to do this. I don't care how cool it looks to other people. There was a day in high school where I was sitting like this. And I'm like, why the fuck am I sitting like this? Why is this cool? You know, what decides what is cool and what is socially accepted? Common is cool. I don't sit like that anymore. Also, the principle is to check into the posture, and I'm not going to use the word posture. I'm going to phase that out. Structure, the structural integration of the human body to reflect a baby without a diaper. Because the baby with the diaper, it looks like they got a really big butt. And it's like, what are you doing? Baby, that's a funny image. Yeah. Okay, so bottom line, those two principles. One, we're just looking to allow our energy to flow naturally, smoothly, and we're doing that with tea or basic mindfulness because that's relaxing the mind. And then our body gets into a particular shape to help relax the body and allow the energy to flow. And my theory, not hypothesis, my theory is that it will lead to better health. You'll feel better. You'll feel more vibrant. Over time, some of those achy, painy things will start to dissipate. They'll start to let themselves go. They'll just shake out in the wind. And then, before you know it, and this is jumping ahead, right, Donna? But before you know it, we're paying attention to how we feel based on our energy body. And when we pay attention to how we feel based on our energy body, behavioral change starts to become a desire. I'm not interacting with my lungs with cannabis. I'm not interacting with cannabis nearly as much because the imbalance starts to feel not well. I don't, and if it doesn't feel good, we're going to be less likely to want to do it because that's a fundamental psychological principle. The human being seeks what is pleasurable and looks to avoid what is displeasurable, pain. That's a basic dynamic of most things that are alive. And I can go with that dynamic rather than against it. So the more in touch I am with my energy body, which knows much better what's good for me than my thinking mind does. So the energy body is in balance, the physical body is in balance, the psychological mind becomes in balance, the energy starts to flow, we feel personal power, we start to heal, we start to look better because we feel better, not because you're fitting some image. It's just like, oh, You look bright, you look cheerful, you look happy, your body's moving, you know, in a way that just looks more, you know, it doesn't, you know, something's going on with you. I don't know what it is, type of thing. So we have all of that. And, you know, we've done it because we check in and then we go back to the practice. And then before you know it, the body is learning how to stand, it's learning how to move. And the behavioral change will come because the things that are causing those plug ups, they won't feel good. You'll feel the plugging up. And that doesn't feel good because we're now aware of it. We're paying attention to it. And there's so many little things in my own experience in terms of behavior, it is changing on its own. And those were things that maybe I would look at before and say, I want to change that. You know, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be that type of person or whatever. So those things have just changed naturally. I want to sit and meditate naturally on its own because of how my body feels when I do it. The energy flows. I like that. I want to, you know, and so psychologically, I want to seek what is pleasurable. Sitting like this now, that this doesn't feel good. I don't care how cool it is. This is never going to feel good to me again. And so naturally, my behavior changes because I want to feel good. You know, I don't want to go through this life all, you know. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns before we get out of here? The feet, okay. Awareness on the feet. We're just looking for weight across the whole foot. Does that make sense? And we can talk more about that. But I am going to have some other, you know, portions of the body over the next 3 weeks. We don't need to talk about too much about principle because that's it, you know. But the rest of the body, we're just going to make it look like a toddler. And then before you know it, we're loose and we're feeling nice. That's good.
I'm thinking of it as laminar flow. I know that specific term is used for water, but I like the image of in my mind. You know, if the water coming out of the faucet is turbulent, you know, I stick my finger under there to make sure nothing's stuck in there, and so the water will come out better. You know, it's just checking in to feel. They got laminar flow going, or is there some turbulence there? And where is it? And adjust.
Right.
But in the feet.
But in the feet, just for now, we're just kind of focusing on our feet. We're wiggling our feet. We're feeling into our feet. If our feet hurt, let's rub them. Let's put some cream on them. Let's take care of them and love them and be nice to them. Yes, G.
I remember in yoga class, we used to pick up golf balls with our toes, you know, just to, and in the beginning, for most people in the class, it was difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we did it enough times and it becomes like a child. I mean, children use their feet almost as well as they use their hands in the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, your brother used to use his toes all the time. My brother Anthony, and he used to freak me out when I was a little kid. He's 13 years older than me, so he would like pick up a grape that rolled across the floor with his toes, or he'd grab my wrist. Like I'd feel all of a sudden, oh no, and his gross foot would grab my wrist, and I would get all freaked out. But yeah, he had good monkey feet.
All right, so if you have any questions individually, just send me a message because we are talking about the body. But as a disclaimer, we shouldn't be doing anything that causes pain, you know, so we shouldn't be doing anything that is, you know, invasive in any way, shape, or form. So we shouldn't really need any, you know, forms and things like that because are we paying attention to our feet? Are they parallel? You know, are they like this or are they like this? Where is the weight right now in my foot? And in principle, we make a small adjustment and go back to the practice. Small adjustment, and that's what the 4 modes is so good at because you can make that small adjustment when you sit. I have stood up. Let me make that adjustment and then go. Adjustment and sit. Adjustment when you lay down. So I think it's a good opportunity, but that principle is there so that we don't over focus, and the principle of balanced energy body and is so that we don't get into this weird dynamic of you have more chi, I have less chi, and I'm chi deficient, and I'm going to send you my chi, give you my chi, because then I'll start charging you for chi. Premiums. Chi is expensive. Okay, I will see you guys again on Thursday. For folks who have one-on-ones, I'll see you in the one-on-ones. For folks who want one-on-ones, you just let me know. I will be happy to meet with everybody, at least once or so in the next few months. If you want more than that, then it's certainly available. I'll do the private student for $75 for one session a week. And then when I do have the assisted 4 modes, I want to offer that as a part of the private student. So you would get two sessions a week. One is like the movement. It's just if you want it. If you want one a week, by all means, take it because it's available to the private student. If you don't want to because you're feeling good, you don't have to force yourself into doing an assisted practice because you probably have your own too. But we would still meet once a week, and we'll talk about moving through this, whether it's T, whether it's hydrostasy. Hydrostasy will start to get into behavioral change. That's kind of its thing, is natural, unforced behavioral change because everything is changing. We just need to direct the flow. That's it. All right, I will see you guys again on Thursday for applied mindfulness. That's our group study. We talk about how we're applying our mindfulness in our everyday life experience. All right, see you guys again soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you.